All right, hello everybody. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jesse Hill and I'm the president of Tier 3 IT Solutions. And today we're going to be talking about what it takes to achieve cybersecurity preparedness and how that affects your insurance success. This is part of a series that we're doing where we are exploring how cybersecurity, cyber insurance, legal, PR, and many other aspects come into play to provide a greater level of protection to your business than one of these could do on their own. First, let's talk about the importance of cybersecurity preparedness. This is something that we run into frequently, and often small and medium businesses don't fully appreciate the risk that is presented to their business as a result of the technologies that they use. And what we mean by this is that the world of cybersecurity and the impacts that it has on your operations and your people and your partnerships is actually very significant. And so what we see is that businesses who prioritize being cyber prepared generally are going to more easily satisfy any compliance or regulatory demands. In Canada, that often means getting appropriate cyber insurance coverage. We find that small and medium businesses sometimes don't think that they have a whole lot of risk when it comes to cyber. But the reality is that the bad actors out there actually prefer to target small and medium businesses because they don't have as many cybersecurity controls in place. They also are less likely to involve large-scale legal and forensic and law enforcement types of actions. The thing about cybersecurity preparedness is that the longer that you wait to start, the further behind your business ends up becoming. So it's important that you're continuously improving and moving forward in many different areas in order to stay not just current, but hopefully move ahead of the game. And then the last thing that we want to point out is that the more effort and the more actively you prepare your business for the cyber frontier, the more you can show your customers, your vendors, your employees, your legal, banking, insurance professionals that you are a trustworthy organization. The last thing that they want to do is have their operations impacted because of a mistake or an oversight on one of their partners' parts. All right, let's talk about the word proactive and how that applies in what we call the risk management strategies that you can undertake in terms of cyber. So the first thing, and we take this very seriously in our organization, is making sure that we understand what it means to be proactive. So our definition is that being proactive means that you have activities planned, scheduled in advance, assigned to specific people, and that those activities and people are working to avoid interruptions, improve efficiency, and just generally make sure that if something were to pop up that could have a negative impact, that you've already thought about it and at least done some initial preparation work for it. Now, in terms of how we would apply this to the proactive risk management strategies component, we want to think about not just technology, but also risk management, partnership relationships, and making sure that your employees understand their role in terms of cyber risk. So the first thing is having robust cyber security policies. And this is something that I, as a business owner, find very interesting. Not exactly exciting, but interesting. And the example that I often give is if you lined up a fleet of 10 new trucks out in the parking lot and put 10 new laptops on the boardroom table, and you were handing them out to employees today, which of those two assets do you have more clearly defined policies developed around? And the reality is that in most cases, it's the vehicle fleet. We know that we can't speed, that we can't drink and drive, that we can't use them for personal purposes. You might even have restrictions of what kinds of passengers you can take or freight and those types of things. But on the computer side, often people are given a computer, very few cyber security controls are in place, and these people are allowed to do whatever they want with them in a lot of cases. They can visit web pages that may not be safe. They can download software from unapproved sources. They can copy, change, modify, delete information. They can send information outside of the organization through email, personal emails, USB sticks. And so the more we think about it and we say, okay, well, the fleet of vehicles is a tool to do a job. Well, the computers are also a tool to do a job. So we should be ensuring that people understand that if they cause a problem, if they try to get a free piece of software that ends up having a malicious payload, it can actually impact the entire organization. So we need to have policies that make sure that people participate in that and understand the risk. All right, the next thing that we want to talk about in proactive risk management is really around selecting appropriate security technologies. And this is incredibly difficult to do, just simply because there are hundreds, if not thousands of solutions out there that claim to be the greatest thing in cybersecurity. And a lot of them have a place, but they also overlap quite a bit. So you really need to understand, what are your greatest risk points? How can those be exploited? And what kinds of protections should you put in place? I want to be very clear that cyber security does not come from downloading and installing a security tool. I was at a conference recently and one of the speakers had a great phrase, and what he said was, cybersecurity is not a product you install, it is a practice you instill. Meaning, even the best cybersecurity product, if it's misconfigured or not fully deployed, can actually allow threats through and end up causing, well, not causing, but allowing a cyber incident to occur. So it's a marriage of products, people, and processes that actually elevate your cybersecurity game. Okay, the last two components on here we're going to talk about are proactive risk management and employee empowerment and training. And the reason that I want to talk about these two together is that realistically, they go hand in hand. So a proactive risk management approach means that you are continuously reviewing and assessing your cybersecurity position, that you are incorporating your staff, that you are running attack simulations, that your staff are participating, that you are educating them, and that you're doing this on a continuous and ongoing basis. And as any insurance professional can attest, the insurance carriers are now starting to require more and more of this type of ongoing training and engagement to qualify for a cyber insurance policy. So not only does it allow you to enhance the knowledge and the skills and the awareness of your team, it actually can lead to easier coverage, better terms, and just an overall higher, more secure position to get that cyber insurance that you might be looking for. One of the topics that we talk about is what we call cyber hygiene, cybersecurity hygiene. And the reality is that when you look at all of the information of cyber incidents and claims, and we can get this through news aggregators and cyber insurance carriers, still a large majority of cyber incidents start with a human error. It's not always an error from the IT department or an administrator. It can often be a frontline employee who has inadvertently allowed access into the systems. So a couple of the tips that we give everybody is, first of all, you've got to have strong authentication practices. And we break this down really into today, two of the primary recommendations are around passwords. Passwords are incredibly difficult for an IT provider and a business owner to enforce and encourage within their organization. But here's what we say. Every single password that you and your staff use should be long, meaning as long as possible. In a perfect world, we would see everybody's passwords being over 25 characters. The reality is that if you look up online, you'll often find recommendations of 10, 12, or 16 characters. So what I want to say is longer is better. Choose one that's as long as you possibly can. The second is that your passwords should be complex, meaning that they are a combination of lowercase, uppercase, numbers, and special characters. Okay, so we've got long, we've got complex. The third one is that every password should be unique. And this is where frequently I start seeing people realize what we're asking. That in order to secure their passwords, they need to completely rethink what they've been doing. Because often we find that people have a similar password or the same password that they use on many different services. And the problem with that is, of course, that if one password were to be compromised, the bad actors can use that to access multiple sites and services. So when we think about having a 25-character password that has lots of complexity, that is different than every other password that you use, you realize very quickly that that's not something that we can typically do on our own in terms of creating and remembering those passwords. So the fourth recommendation that we make is you should be using a secure password manager. Realistically, in our opinion, this is the only way that you can achieve the first three. And the benefit of using a password manager are a couple of things. First of all, it allows you to randomly create long, complex passwords for every site. It allows you to store them in a secure, encrypted way, so that you only ever need to remember the username and password to get into that password manager in order to access all of your passwords. We're of course going to talk about multi-factor authentication because that is a requirement as far as we're concerned around password managers. The other point I want to make about password managers that makes them incredibly valuable is that they will automatically fill your username and your password on the web pages that you're visiting. The reason that I think that this is really important is that we mentioned earlier that many of the cyber breaches happen as a result of human error, typically through a phishing email or compromise. And what happens in those is that somebody receives an email, they click on a link that takes them to a page that appears to be legitimate. If they were to look really closely, they would notice that the URL is different than the legitimate web page that they might be trying to visit. So as an example, they might be visiting Microsoft.com, but when they look, maybe instead of the O in soft, it's an A, or instead of the I, it's an L. And at first glance, you might look at it and think that it's the right page, and you start entering your username and password. Well, if you're using a password manager, it will automatically recognize that that is not a legitimate site, and it won't insert your username and password. And that would be a first clue for you that that site is not legitimate, and a reason to close that browser, and think again about whether you want to try accessing that. The second thing we want to talk about in terms of good cybersecurity hygiene around passwords is every single site or service where it's possible, enable your multi-factor authentication. So I just mentioned your password manager. I mean, it's almost, I don't even think it's an option at this point. Every single password manager is going to have a multi-factor authentication that should be enforced in order for you to log in. And that just makes sense because you're giving access to all of your passwords for every site. Now, of course, multi-factor authentication is going to ask you to put in a secondary verification code that would come from a text message, an email, or an authenticator app. You also want to enable that on your email service provider, your banking website, your accounting, your ERP, and any other site or service that has that capability available. The more you embrace these, the more secure you and your staff and your business are going to be, the lower your risk of suffering a cyber incident. One thing we should also talk about is that your cyber insurance carrier and broker are starting to require on your application an attestation that you have enabled multi-factor authentication on your primary web services. It's really important that you think about how you're answering that question and that you're able to prove that you have that in place. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about here is just general maintenance. You know, your computer network is incredibly complex. You have many different servers, devices, operating systems, software packages, and there's a world of people and tools out there that are trying to find ways to compromise those. And so the major software providers, one of the reasons that they charge you an ongoing maintenance fee is to provide ongoing updates and security patches to address any of those vulnerabilities. Now, the thing we want to be careful of is we don't want to just turn on automatic updates. This can actually cause problems because every year there are updates that are released that inadvertently cause problems that we may not have had if we didn't install them right away. So you usually want to wait. You want to make sure that those updates have been verified by the general population and that they're safe before you install them. So a proactive IT provider is able to review, approve, and deploy those updates in a measured way to help keep you protected against those vulnerabilities and risks. All right, let's talk about incident response planning. And this is a really interesting part of the discussion here today because, quite frankly, most businesses that we encounter, when we ask them about their incident response plan, they tell us, well, our IT department takes care of that, or our IT provider takes care of that. And the problem with that perspective is that incident response is not a technology function. And what I mean by that is that when you're involved in a cyber incident, and it could be something as simple as an email inbox has been compromised and accessed inadvertently. It could be that a member of your staff has emailed private information to an outside party. It could be something really big like a ransomware incident or a network compromise. Every single one of those incidents is going to be different, and it's going to need to involve the collaboration between your leadership team, your frontline staff, potentially outside legal, insurance, public relations, forensic IT, and then of course the regular IT team or department. And so the important thing for small and medium businesses to realize is often you don't know what you don't know. And so the thing that you want to do around incident response planning is you want to sit down and you want to start thinking about it. Start with getting your leadership team into a room and talking about one of those scenarios. What would happen if our financials were leaked to an outside party? What would we do if, we found out that a laptop that had our, business plan got stolen? Because these are scenarios that require a business response that the IT team is going to support. So the first thing is you should be prepared, right? Be prepared by educating yourself and your team about the types of scenarios that could happen. Running regular tests and updates means making sure that you understand the world of cyber threats. And as I just mentioned, it's not always a technology problem that causes an incident. Sometimes, many times, it's a human element that does that. There are organizations out there that can help with incident response plan templates. Often if you talk to your insurance broker or carrier, they may have a template that you can use that will give you an idea what it should look like. I want to be very clear that a template filled in with your information does not equal an incident response plan. You actually need to work through it. Your people need to understand it. They need to be trained on it. And then the last component on here is training and drills. And I can personally attest to this, that one of the most powerful exercises that we do with our team is, a couple times a year, we sit in the boardroom and we simulate an attack on our business. And the reason that this is so valuable is because it gives the members of our team an opportunity to talk about what would we do in this scenario? What are the problems we might encounter? Who else needs to be involved? What can we do differently to avoid this? And the thing that I have learned through going through that exercise is that doing it in a safe place, in a practice environment, allows us to learn, to make mistakes, to prepare ourselves. And I would highly encourage you to do the same with your team. Okay, let's talk about the value of collaboration, specifically when it comes to cybersecurity experts. Cybersecurity from a technical practice area is incredibly complex. It ranges from training and awareness and working with people to reviewing very detailed configurations and logs and outputs, to working on plans and policies and working to proactively prepare the organization, overseeing many different aspects of service delivery. And so the reason I share all this is to just remind you it is incredibly complex and it's growing all of the time. In our world, we lead with a security perspective. So while our clients and our partners might always want a fast response, we unfortunately need to balance that against the security concerns. What I always say is that if we think about security and convenience as being like a scale, they are inverse. The more security measures we put in place, the lower the convenience, right? The more hoops people have to jump through. The higher the convenience, the lower the security. So the reason that you would want to work with a cybersecurity expert is that we are seeing what organizations across a broad base are concerned about, doing to prepare themselves. We're also working with many different vendors that, quite frankly, are not available to an individual business. Most of the leading cybersecurity providers and solutions are recognizing that they're really good at building high-powered platforms. They're not so good at dealing with individual clients. That's where an IT service provider like ourselves comes in. So when you work with a cybersecurity expert, a firm that has a team that specializes in this, you're unlocking that expertise. You are getting access to the people that have the insight and the knowledge that you would not be able to add to your team in a meaningful way. Because it's not one person, it's a collection of people and processes and products and tools. The other thing is that by working with an outside party like us, you are getting access to a more collaborative environment. As I mentioned, the team is the key. We're able to take what we're seeing across our client base and tailor it and build customized solutions depending on your specific needs. As an example, a client in healthcare might have a different security requirement than somebody that's in the financial industry or in retail. And so we want to make sure that it's not just a one-size-fits-all application. And then the last one on here, of course, access to cutting-edge tools and technologies. As I mentioned, many of the top tools and solutions providers work exclusively with managed IT service providers like us, because they don't necessarily have the team and the processes and the bandwidth to engage with individual clients. They're really good at developing high-end cybersecurity tools. We're really good at deploying them and managing relationships with clients. All right, let's talk about employee awareness programs, specifically as it relates to cybersecurity awareness. This is one of the most difficult, but most impactful and most rewarding components that you can put into your cybersecurity program. And the reason, as we mentioned earlier, is that most cyber incidents begin from a human error. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that your team as a whole feels empowered, that they understand that every time they click a link, they are having an impact on the business. And the reality is that when they make a mistake, it can impact everybody in the organization. So they need to understand what those risks look like, how to spot them, how to avoid them, and they need to be comfortable reporting a suspected incident. So really, when it comes down to the cybersecurity awareness programs, it needs to be deployed on a regular basis. We've seen some instances where businesses, they make their people do a little training program once a year. Well, the reality is that cyber threats change throughout the year. We also know that regular micro training is more effective than doing a single batch training. So our preference is to send out training either on a weekly or a monthly basis, short snippets that are targeted around the types of threats that people might run into, educating them about how they are expected to respond and how they can protect themselves. An important note around cybersecurity awareness training is that many insurance carriers are requiring this as an eligibility component for cyber insurance coverage. So it is critically important that you pursue that and ensure that your people are completing it on an ongoing basis. All right, thanks for joining me today. Again, my name is Jesse Hill. I'm the president of Tier 3 IT Solutions. If you have any questions or comments, you'd like to talk a little bit more about your specific, unique cybersecurity preparation posture, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to connect and get to know you a little bit more. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.